Welcome to Neural Nexus Podcast, where we explore the hottest topics shaping the world. Let's dive in.
All right, so Delhi's recent election had some pretty wild results, right? Like the Aadmi party, AAP, had been in power for 10 years.
Yeah, a decade.
And they had put all those popular policies into place.
Yeah.
You know, everyone thought they were going to win again.
Yeah. It was a really unexpected outcome, especially when you think about where AAP came from, coming out of that anti-corruption movement.
Back in 2012.
Yeah. And they got super popular really quickly.
Yeah. They won the last two elections by a landslide.
Huge margins.
Largely because of their policies like free water and electricity for low-income folks.
Yeah.
It seemed like those policies really resonated with their voter base.
Yeah. They were really impactful because Delhi has a ton of people living below the poverty line, and basic utilities like water and electricity are a huge problem for a lot of people.
AAP really zeroed in on that need.
Yeah.
And they actually came up with solutions.
Yeah.
Which obviously solidified their support.
So with all that going for them, what happened? How did the BJP, led by Prime Minister Modi, manage to win so decisively? I mean, 48 out of 70 seats. Well, the BJP ran a very strategic campaign. They definitely leveraged their national strength. Obviously, Modi is a very powerful figure.
Right.
And they've been gaining more and more power across India. But for Delhi, they went beyond their usual strategies.
What do you mean?
So they saw that AAP's social welfare programs were really working.
Okay.
So they came up with their own targeted promises.
Oh.
The BJP promised to give direct financial assistance to a bunch of different groups. Like they promised monthly payments to women living in poverty, one-time payments to pregnant women, subsidized cooking gas, all sorts of things.
So they kind of outbid them.
Yeah.
Instead of dismantling AAP's existing programs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They targeted the same demographic but offered different benefits. It was a smart way to appeal to voters who already liked the idea of social welfare programs.
And do you think this had anything to do with AAP's leaders losing their seats? I mean, we're talking about Kejriwal himself.
Right.
His former deputy Manish Sisodia and others like Satyendra Jain.
It's definitely something to think about. The loss wasn't just for the party. It was very personal for many of its leaders. And it's left AAP with a huge leadership vacuum. Only two senior AAP leaders are left in the assembly. Atishi, the outgoing CM, and Gopal Rai.
Wow, that's a big hit to the party. What do you think this means for AAP's future? Can they come back from this?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This is a whole new challenge for them. They're going to be the opposition for the first time.
Right.
They'll need to rebuild, reassess, and probably bring in some new leaders if they want to stay relevant in Delhi politics.
And what about that whole thing with Kejriwal getting arrested on graft charges last year? Did that have anything to do with their loss?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely something we can't just ignore. He was released on bail, but the arrest definitely made people question his leadership.
Especially since AAP started as an anti-corruption party.
Exactly. Voters might have started to wonder if the party was really living up to its own ideals.
So it's not just about the BJP's win. It's also about some internal problems that AAP has to deal with if they want to gain back the trust they've lost.
Absolutely. This election showed that AAP has some weaknesses that they need to fix if they want to move forward.
But let's step back for a second and look at the bigger picture. How do these state election results affect national politics?
State elections in India are never just about the state. They always have an effect on the national level. Like winning state elections helps parties get more seats in the upper house of parliament, the Rajya Sabha.
Can you explain that a little bit? Why is getting seats in the Rajya Sabha so important?
So the Rajya Sabha,
Yeah.
or Council of States, has a lot of power when it comes to making laws. It's like a check on the Lok Sabha, the lower house of parliament. The BJP needs a strong presence in the Rajya Sabha to be able to pass laws and do what they want to do.
So this win in Delhi basically gives the BJP more power on the national level.
Definitely. It makes Modi's position stronger and gives him more influence to push through the laws he wants. It's a big deal for how power works in the Indian government.
This brings up some interesting questions. How might this victory embolden the BJP to go after their agenda even harder? And what does this mean for the balance of power in India?
Those are all good points and definitely worth thinking about. But before we get too deep into the national stuff, let's bring it back to the people of Delhi.
Yeah, good point.
What does this change in power actually mean for them practically?
Right. We've talked a lot about the politics. But what about the everyday lives of the people who will be directly affected by all this?
The BJP has made a lot of big promises for Delhi. But will they actually be able to deliver? Will they keep the popular programs that AAP started, or will they come up with their own new things?
And what about everything AAP has done over the past 10 years? What happens to all that? Will it be completely dismantled, or will some of it stay?
These are all questions that people in Delhi are wondering about right now. The political landscape has totally changed, and there's a lot of uncertainty while people wait to see what this new chapter will bring.
Yeah, it's like we're all holding our breath, waiting to see what happens.
It's a good way to put it. There's a lot of anticipation, but also a bit of worry as people adjust to this new reality and try to figure out what it means for their lives, their communities, and their city.
Yeah, it's definitely a time of change.
Yeah.
And I bet a lot of people are nervous about what this means for all those programs AAP started.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that were really popular?
Oh, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I
Mhm.
mean, the big question now is if the BJP will just kind of fold those programs into their own plan or if they'll try to replace them completely.
Right.
If you look at what they've done in other states, it seems like they might want to control things more from the center, which could mean some pretty big changes for Delhi.
That makes me think about AAP now that they're the opposition. They have a totally different job now. Do you think they can really keep the BJP in check and make sure that people in Delhi are still getting what they need?
I think that's what everyone's wondering. It all comes down to whether AAP can handle this new situation.
Right.
They've never been the opposition before, so they'll need to find different ways to use their power and hold the government accountable.
Yeah. It's their chance to show that they're not just about popular policies, that they can still be a strong voice for the people, even when they're not in charge.
Exactly. They need to prove that they're really committed to what they say they believe in. Can they get their supporters to be a positive source even though they lost? Can they hold the BJP accountable without playing the same kind of divisive politics that they were against when they started?
And what about the people in all of this? You said earlier that this is a really important time for people to get involved.
Oh.
What can regular people do to make sure they're heard and that their needs are met now that things have changed?
This is where you come in, our listener. It's easy to feel helpless when big things like this happen in politics.
Yeah.
But it's super important to stay involved, stay informed, and keep pushing for what you believe in.
So what does that actually look like?
There are lots of ways to do it. Keep up with what's going on. Go to your local council meetings. Write to the people you elected. Take part in peaceful protests. And talk to people in your community about these issues.
It's about making sure those in power are doing their jobs, no matter what party they're from.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about reacting to decisions that have already been made. It's about being proactive, speaking up for the policies you support, and working to make your city a better place.
This whole thing really shows how much politics can change, doesn't it? Like, who would have guessed that things would switch up so much after AAP being in charge for so long?
Yeah. It reminds us that political power is never a sure thing. It's always changing depending on what the people want, what the parties are doing, and what's happening with the economy and society.
And it seems like maybe AAP kind of forgot about how things can change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had that big success early on.
It's easy to get comfortable when you've been winning for a long time.
Right.
And that can be a problem for any political party. You can get so caught up in running things day to day that you forget to pay attention to what people need and how they're feeling.
And that can make you vulnerable to a party like the BJP that really wants power and is willing to change its game plan to take advantage of the situation.
Exactly. The BJP saw an opportunity in Delhi, and they took it. They ran a really smart campaign that worked because it spoke to what voters were worried about. They talked about the economy, offered solutions, and used their national power to make themselves look like the party that could bring progress and stability.
But besides this specific election, are there any bigger lessons that other parties can learn from what happened to AAP?
Mm-hmm.
You know, parties that might be facing similar challenges or maybe getting too comfortable with their own success?
I think there are a few big takeaways. First, never forget how important it is to stay connected to the people you represent. Listening to their concerns, understanding what they need, and actually doing something to help them is crucial if you want them to keep trusting you and supporting you.
Yeah, it's about remembering that you have to earn the right to lead. It's not something you just get automatically.
That's right. And second, political parties need to be able to adapt. Things change all the time. And if you can't keep up with those changes, you'll get left behind.
AAP had a good thing going for a while, but things changed and they couldn't adjust.
It's kind of ironic. Their early success might have actually made them less flexible and less responsive to what voters wanted.
Which leads us to the third lesson. Never underestimate a good campaign. The BJP's campaign in Delhi was really well done. They found AAP's weaknesses and gave voters a different choice.
They did a good job of combining their national message with promises that were specific to Delhi. They appealed to people's hopes for the future and also to their practical needs.
And we can't forget about the media. How did the news coverage, both before and after the election, affect how people saw things and maybe even influence the results?
The media definitely has a big influence on how people understand politics. It's important to be aware of any biases or agendas that might be shaping how information is presented.
So as a listener, how can I be smarter about what I'm reading and hearing from the media, especially during something like an election when there's so much information out there?
You have to be critical. Don't just accept everything you see or hear. Think about where the information is coming from. Consider different points of view and do your own research to form your own opinion.
Yeah, it's about being actively involved with the information you're getting, not just passively taking it in.
Exactly. And that's true for all kinds of media, not just news. Being a critical consumer of information is essential for figuring things out in today's world.
So we've covered a lot here. We've talked about why AAP lost, how the BJP won, and what it all means for Delhi and for India as a whole. But I think it's interesting to go back to how surprising this all was. What does this unexpected outcome tell us about where Indian politics is right now?
I think it shows just how unpredictable politics can be. No party, no matter how powerful or popular, can ever be sure they'll win.
Yeah, it seems like voters are really paying attention. They're not just voting for the same party every time. They're looking at what's actually getting done and who they think can do a better job.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing people focus more on specific issues and how well the government is doing. And that's probably going to have a big impact on how politics works in India. Parties can't just rely on people being loyal to them or on the same old stories they've been telling.
Right.
They have to show that they can actually make things better for people.
This election definitely sent a message to the party that was in charge. So I think they were told, hey, you need to wake up and remember who you're working for. You have to stay connected to what people want and be ready to change if things aren't working.
It's a good lesson, not just for politicians in India, but for anyone who's in charge of something. The key to staying successful is to understand how things are changing around you and be able to adapt.
And that brings us back to our listeners. What can they take away from all this talk about Delhi's election? What are some things they can think about, even if they're not into politics?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to remember to think critically and be informed about what's going on. We're constantly getting information from everywhere, especially online.
Right.
And it's really important to be able to figure out what's true, what's not, and what might be biased.
Yeah. It's about being in control of the information you're getting instead of just letting it wash over you.
Exactly. You have to question things, look at things from different angles, and don't be afraid to disagree with what everyone else is saying. And that's not just for news, it's for everything. The choices you make in your life and your work.
And the other thing I think this election shows is that individuals can really make a difference.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel like your voice doesn't matter, especially when it comes to big political stuff. But this election proved that even small changes in what people think can have a huge impact.
Yeah. Every vote matters and every voice matters. Whether you're voting, working in your community, or just talking to people about these things, what you do as an individual can help shape the world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive here, the final thought we want to leave you with is this. Don't underestimate the power you have to make a difference. Stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking questions. The future is made by people who participate, not by people who just sit back and watch.
Well said. And don't forget that learning and understanding is a journey that never ends. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep looking at things in new ways.
And that's it for our look at Delhi's crazy election. We hope you learned something interesting and got some things to think about. Until next time, stay curious.